Hello, I'm Noah Fortenberry, and this is my presentation for digital media history on the influences of Devil May Cry. The origin of Devil May Cry was that it was initially going to be Resident Evil 4 for the PS2. It was being directed by Hideki Kamiya, the future founder of Platinum Games. But because of its game's more action-oriented focus, it was deemed not fit for Resident Evil, so it was changed to be a completely new IP. And there are assets shared between Resident Evil 4 and Devil May Cry 1. The combat of Devil May Cry introduced a larger emphasis on aerial combat than had been seen before in 3D action games. It allowed you to juggle enemies in the air and keep them suspended by repeatedly attacking them with either swords or guns. This concept was thought of by Hideki Kamiya after playing a pre-release build of Onimusha Warlords, my mistake, where he could juggle enemies, but it was a glitch, and he decided to implement that as a feature in the Devil May Cry series. Devil May Cry encourages the player to diversify how they interact with enemies by implementing the style system, which punished players for using the same attack over and over again, getting them to be more creative with how they interact with the enemies and not just making them defeat them as easily as possible, or as fast as possible, I should say. Devil May Cry 2 is a very different story, where it was not being developed by the same development team as the first game, or with the same director at all. And near the end of development, Hideaki Itsuno was chosen to be the director to salvage as much of the project as possible. He did his best, but Devil May Cry 2 did not really come out as a very good game. But he has been the director of the series ever since, and has been able to keep it afloat and innovate in different ways than Kamiya, so in the end it was a good thing that he was attached to the project. Devil May Cry 3 was the first game Itsuno developed or directed from the very beginning. It introduced Dante's 4 styles of Gunslinger, Trickster, Swordsmaster, and Royal Guard, allowing players to pick one of those 4 between missions, and again, further letting the player be creative with how they interacted with enemies and developing their own style throughout the game. It also introduced Virgil as a rival character and a perfect motivator for the player to get better, as Virgil was meant as an antithesis to Dante and having a very similar move set, so striving to be better than him was a constant theme throughout the game as you fight him 3 times, one being a loss, the other being kind of a tie, and the third finally being a victory at the very end. Devil May Cry 4 introduced Nero as a new protagonist with an easier to learn moveset because by this time Dante's moveset had been getting larger and larger and maybe be overwhelming for new players. And in this game they further made Dante's moveset even more complex by allowing him to switch between the 4 styles from Devil May Cry 3 at a moment's notice with the touch of a button on the D-pad, giving players even more options of how to interact with enemies. And in Devil May Cry, there are basically 2 important moves that came from the series that are used in games to this day in the same genre, which is High Time, which is essentially just a launcher that gets enemies into the air to allow you to juggle them or do whatever you want using any other weapon or gun. And that's just kind of something that's necessary in most character entry games, just a launcher to get enemies into the air easily. And then also Stinger. Stinger is a move that allows Dante to thrust forward with his sword and close the gap between enemies so not to lose your style ranking and just kind of keep the flow of the pace of the game nice and fast. Platinum Games is a development studio started by Hideki Kamiya, the original creator of Devil May Cry, and he has since went on to make other character action style games like Bayonetta or Astral Chain, which use Dante's moveset as somewhat of a base to develop these movesets, but through that make interesting and new characters with different abilities. And it's important to keep the genre diverse like this with lots of different play styles. So in the end, Devil May Cry has influenced a lot of action games and character action games through its moveset and story tropes. And I guess that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.